podcast, folks. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and we've got an incredible show for you today. But first, don't forget to check out us out at manufacturingculturepodcast.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to stay completely updated with all of our latest content. A huge shout out to our sponsor, Spironi, for their ongoing support. And guess what, folks? Today, we're recording right here at WIMTS 2023. Now, are you ready to meet a true manufacturing legend? Our next guest is basically manufacturing royalty, with roots so deep, they've almost hit a century. Drum roll, please, for Mr. Terry Iverson. You want credentials? Oh, Terry's got them. He was the president and CEO of Iverson and Company, powerhouse in machine tool distribution. That's right, folks. 4 decades of shaking hands, making deals, and changing the game. You know what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. His family's been in the biz so long that in 2025, they'll hit 100 years of manufacturing greatness. But wait, there's more. This guy doesn't just sit in an office. No siree. Terry's pounding the pavement, speaking at schools, serving on advisory boards, and helping pave the way for the next generation of manufacturing superstars. Talk about paying it forward. What you ask? Well, Terry met his soulmate Kathy in junior high, and they're still going strong. With 3 adult kids and 8 grandkids. As for his intellect, he sharpened his wit studying mechanical engineering at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and Marquette University. Oh, and did we mention he's a published author? Yes, he's penned books aimed at changing perceptions about manufacturing careers. But he didn't stop there. He founded Champion Now and even started Camp Champ to get kids hyped about manufacturing. We're talking about mentoring, skill building, and even making pens on tabletop CNC machines. Blows my mind. So strap in, listeners. You're about to get a masterclass in manufacturing from a guy who lived it, loved it, and lit the way for the rest of us. Terry, welcome to the show, and congrats on your recent transition from Iverson and Company to the new leadership of Dewan Lever. We can't wait to hear all about your journey and what the future holds. Let's get this show on the road. Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. I don't know if I can stand all those accolades. They're all true, but when you put them together and you say them the way you did, I'm like, wow, who is this guy? Where is he?
That's awesome. I've told every guest that I do this with, my favorite part of this podcast, is actually writing the intros for my guests, because I get to make something and create something that I've never gotten to do before, right? I've always been a salesperson who was given this talking points. So this gives me the opportunity to be creative in a way that I've never been able to. I love it so much. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. Terry, tell us about your journey in this industry. I mean, you've been in this industry for 40 years plus at this point.
Yep.
Iverson and Co. has been super successful. You've now successfully started to transition starting in June. But take us back. How did your family get into this? Talk about the familial history in this industry and what drew you to the industry to kick it off your journey.
Well, to start with, everything started with my grandfather. My grandfather, back in the 1920s, Harding's was located in Chicago.
Yep.
My family's been associated with Harding's pretty much forever. And his father had passed. He wasn't the oldest, but he had to actually earn income to support the family.
Wow.
He had brothers and sisters and his mom, and he became the breadwinner, even though he wasn't the oldest child. So he literally started sweeping floors, and he got a job. You know, the Depression was right in that time frame. Things weren't overly prosperous in those years. And so what they realized is that he was really pretty good in math and science.
Okay.
And that topic will come up, in my journey later. So all of a sudden they said, well, look, you're sweeping the floors, but clearly, engineering, he didn't have any formal education. So he started getting involved, and back around, that was in 1925, as you alluded to. And then 1931, Harding's was bought out by a company, a collet company in New York, upstate New York, and they moved the machine division out to New York.
Yep.
And they asked 3 people to go with, and he was one of the 3, but he was the only one to decline. Okay. And he just couldn't take his family and uproot them and have them all move, simultaneously, or leave them when he's the breadwinner. So that's how we got started as a distributor.
Got it.
And so when I say he represented Harding's in the Midwest in the beginning, 1931. So that's the roots of our company. Fast forward, my dad got involved in the company in about the late 1950s. I got involved in the company around 1980. And here we are, flash forward to 2023. And when I was a young person, I actually grew up in Florida. My parents had split when I was young. And I initially went to Florida State thinking that, I don't want to go into the family business. And I was far enough removed from my dad on a growing up standpoint since I was 6. So it wasn't that I was so close to it. And then after my second year of college, I'm like, all right, wait a minute. I don't want to be a photographer. There's only so many on the sidelines of NFL sidelines.
Yeah.
Even though that's probably what I wanted to do. Psychologist, I don't want to do that. What's the people's problem day in and day out? And then I'm like, I took AP Physics, AP Calculus, pretty good at math and science. Why am I not going down that path? So as you alluded in the intro, I did go to Madison for a couple terms, went back to Florida, got engaged, moved back to Wisconsin, went to Marquette after I got married, worked at my uncle's shop in Wisconsin, which at the time was called Custom Products.
Okay.
And he had built that company at the time up to about 150 people.
Wow.
He bought it indirectly from Russ Gilman. Everyone in Wisconsin knows who Russ Gilman is. He's a pillar in the community, and or was. And he bought it with 5 people, built it up eventually to 750 people. But at the time I joined the company, it was about 150. And then my dad approached me when I was about 6 months in. Hey, do you want to join the family business and go into machine tool sales?
Yeah.
And I almost told him no on the spot. I mean, if it wasn't for my wife, Kathy, saying what's your problem? Why wouldn't you say yes? So I'm like, man, you don't know how difficult my dad is to work for. I mean, his standards are insanely high. And people might say that about me, but whatever. Not to the degree of my dad. So anyway, that's how I started. That's how the family business got started. I was very, very blessed to have a lot of good employees, as was he. I was very, very blessed to learn how to be a good salesperson, taking the engineering and science background that I had in that, and then taking my personal traits of communication. And in my books, I call myself I'm addicted to being a social being. I'm like a social addict. So the thought of being a mechanical engineer and either sitting behind a computer or on a draft board, I'm like, yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah, I get that. So tell us about the cultural journey of Iverson and Co. before we jump into your more recent adventures that you've been on. When you took over for your dad, where would you say the culture was internally at Iverson and Co.?
Well, like anything, I don't ever believe, I'm not a black and white guy. I tell my kids all the time that even black's the darkest shade of gray.
Sure.
And even white is the lighter shade. But the culture, I think, was a lot more old school, and I tried to bring, the computerization element.
Yeah.
My dad was in the land of automatic machines, manual machines.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of similarities too.
Yeah.
Had a little bit of softer tone than my dad, but dad, everyone always said my dad was tough but fair, and I would agree with that. He was a little tougher on me, so I tried to be not quite as demanding as he was, but nonetheless, I did learn, in my opinion, the right way to do things. Yeah. And I mentored a lot of young people, so some of which are little throughout the show here today.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. There's several people that have worked for me, and they would probably say the same thing about me. They shared a story about one of my salespeople that just got out of a great call. I was all excited. Called me at 3:30, and I'm like, "So where are you stopping now? I mean, you're not cashing it in. That's just one good call. 3:30, you got 4:30, baby. You got to make calls right to the end." So anyway, someone shared that with me yesterday, which I thought was probably typical me. But as far as the culture, I think I enhanced the culture a little bit. I think in some ways I didn't do as good a job as my dad, but those were different times. We were definitely a bigger player, and we had our challenges over, especially in recent years. And so I'm just proud that that I was able to do what I could for the employees, do what I could for our customers, and then keep plugging, to 2023, which was a challenge.
Yeah. Oh, the last 3 years alone, the challenges that our industry, the world has faced, the people in this industry have faced, has been astronomical, right? So I can't imagine having a business of your magnitude and having to weather that storm. It had to have been tough.
One thing I'll interject, not to interrupt, Jim, but my dad is as old as my dad was at the time, right?
Yeah.
The one thing I learned is a small business has to pivot and be really good at it. And I think he did an exceptional job at that. And I think I was forced to do either as good or better job.
Yeah.
But I have to say kudos to our employees, because you know what? They had my dad's back and they had my back.
That's awesome.
And I'm hoping they'll have Glenn's back as the new owner. And I trust that they will. But, without good people, and that's more important today than ever. For 43 years, I've heard the same thing. It just got louder and louder in that, we have to find more talent. We have to find more skilled talent. And what I tell people is, I say, look, worry about the talent later.
Yeah.
Find people that are ethical, that are integrity-based, that are honest and hardworking. And then just make sure they have aptitude.
Yeah.
And then it's on you to make sure that they can become the skilled employee you want.
Absolutely. I mean, to kind of expand on that, Terry, my whole take on culture is just simply the alignment of values of the organization and the values of the people. So if you start hiring based on those values, not necessarily on skill or aptitude, right? Aptitude is big, right? But maybe not skill as the driver for this, which I think so many companies have been doing for the last 5-10 years because of the shortage of people. We'll just take anybody who can fog a mirror and can use this, vertical mill. I think that if we simply break it back down to what you're saying, hire based on values. If you value integrity, if your organization values integrity, hire based on that. Then train that person up, right? But so often we're trying to get people in the door at young, early stage career wages, but we want 15 years of experience, right? So that creates a dichotomy that's really tough for people to weather the storm, right? You're not hiring based on values. That's why we see turnover. When you hire based on values, you see less turnover, right? So I think that just builds off of what you're talking about there, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, if I look back, because I started running the company when I was 26.
Yeah.
My dad went through cancer surgery and said, look, I've done this long enough. You've been on the road in Wisconsin. You're in Illinois now. You're in the business. Now start acting like you run it.
Yeah.
And I told him I did not want a title, because that's just going to hurt.
Yeah.
I'm the son of the boss. He was the son of the boss. And the title can just really get in your way.
Sure.
And so I didn't take a title probably for, oh my God, another dozen years. And, but that being said, when I go back, when I didn't trust my gut and those, character elements that you can't teach.
Yeah.
Honesty, integrity, work ethic, and diligence, and those type of things, which a lot of people talk about now. And the time that I went against my gut, it didn't work out. So my dad always thought, and my grandfather always taught him to always think long term.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's a short term world we're in right now, and the people that are going to persevere are the people that think long term.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? It costs a lot to do that.
Yeah.
So you got to be willing to sacrifice profit, and not everyone's going to sign up for that, but sacrifice profit for longevity and for lasting staying power.
Yeah, awesome. So this latest transition, it's a big move. What led to the decision to sell and exit the organization?
Well, I'm probably going to be affiliated with the organization for much longer than the year that I signed up to mentor the new owners.
Yeah.
But, one of the things that I felt very strongly about, Jim, is, I was blessed to be the third generation.
Yeah.
And for the third generation to last and then successfully get into the next ownership, whether it be family or not family, there's less than 1% to do that.
Wow.
And I think to get to the third generation is like 20% less.
Yeah.
But to get it past the third generation is less than 1%. And not that statistics mean anything, but to take a 92-year-old gem and to literally close it down, which was the only option I had, I'm like, yeah, that's not me.
Yeah.
I've never run the business about dollars and cents. I've been taught by my father and his father before him that you really make decisions based on the character build-up that your foundation of your company.
Yeah.
And all the people that you're hiring. So that sometimes maybe initially is hard, but once you get used to it, you're like, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But that being said, I did a soft search for probably 10 years and finally found Delon, and he's the right guy.
Okay.
He's the right guy because he believes in legacy, history. He believes in a lot of the character that you and I talked about, and he wants to do things that I couldn't do.
Sure.
For our not just necessarily our customers. He's going to do the same thing we've always done, but he's going to try to do more for the employees that the last 10 or 13 years I haven't been able to.
Yeah, awesome. That's awesome. So talk to us about this transition, Terry, into Champion Now. How did this all come about? How did this organization start with you, and what's that journey been like for you?
Well, it's been a journey, just like any success or failure story. Either one, it's always a journey. But I started in the mid '90s, focusing a lot on education.
Yeah.
One of my counterparts that sold the same type of equipment that I did, made a focus on it, and I like that.
Yeah.
The other, Harry Moser, who I'm sure you probably interviewed.
I haven't yet. I haven't gotten Harry on here yet. Oh yeah, he's on my short list.
Harry inspired me in the mid 1990s.
Okay.
And he got me speaking to young people.
Yeah.
And then that led to me selling to a lot of technical schools and high schools.
Yeah.
And then that led me to speaking to more young people in schools. And then eventually I got on probably 20, 30 high school advisory boards, 5 to 15 different technical college and community college advisory boards. And then I joined the TMA Education Foundation. Brian Albrecht from Wisconsin from Gateway, who retired from Gateway. I was at the CTE Education Foundation in DC.
Okay.
And then I got involved, MATC got me involved in Flight, which is down in Florida. And so I was on my way to DC to meet with Brian. And I'm like, I got to kind of brand this and give some framing around it. And so I'm sitting on a plane, do a lot of work on a plane because someone with ADHD, if you're locked in a cylindrical tube for 4 hours, 2 hours, 13 hours, you get really creative. And so I took a napkin and I'm like, change, manufacturing, perception. Come on. TMP. Champ. Wait, American or advanced. Champ. And then, so when I got champ figured out, then I'm like, champion. Internation. I'm like, wow, that actually works.
Yeah.
And champion is such a great term.
Yeah.
And it's more used now than it was 10 years ago, and it will be more used going forward. Just the term itself, that's when I decided to call Champion Now.
Yeah.
And then in 2012, I actually incorporated it as a 501c3.
Okay.
And then in 2013, literally back to that, on a plane for 13 hours going to Taiwan, I'm like, it really stinks if either I die or I retire and I don't use all these connections, all this information. Why wouldn't I, as part of my obligation to the industry, that my family is soon going to be able to celebrate 100 years, why wouldn't I try to help others?
Yeah.
So during that plane ride for 13 hours, I wrote 43,000 words. And I sat on a
laptop or by hand?
On a laptop.
Wow.
And fortunately, overseas planes have the plunge.
Yeah.
And several people, one of the Flint boys out of Georgia, they're friends of mine. One of them said, "Are you writing a book?" I go, "I don't know. I've never read any books. I have no idea." But at that point, I said, "You know what? 43,000 words. No one wants to hear it just from me."
Yeah.
Regardless of what I have to say. And then I started pulling in either relatives or associates from business or friends from Florida.
Yeah.
And, I got a lot of people that are pretty interesting, fascinating people.
Yeah.
And I brought in mentoring and parenting into the first book.
Cool.
And my concept there was if I can get people through mentoring and parenting to be interested, and then just as a byproduct, learn about manufacturing.
Yeah.
Man, all the better.
Absolutely.
So that's how Champion Now came about, and that's how the first book came about.
Awesome. I love that. That's great, man. What was the name of the first book?
Finding America's Greatest Champion.
Walk us through the premise.
Well, the premise was that people just don't know.
Yeah.
So you have to find it. And America's Greatest Champion, I define it in many ways. But the initial way is manufacturing is our greatest champion.
Yeah.
Well, then you can also, and I wrote about this. I wrote it during the Me Too movement, and I'm like, you know what? Why are there so few women in our industry?
Yeah.
And so I defined the female gender in the workforce, specifically the manufacturing workforce, is also America's, or should be America's greatest.
Yeah.
So I define it several ways.
Awesome.
Our youth. When I talk about mentoring and parenting, I talk about our youth as our greatest champion.
Yeah.
And so that's the premise of the book, and it addresses educators, industry members, students, and parents.
Okay. Great. You've recently released the second book, right? Within this year. I don't know exactly when.
It was earlier this year.
Yeah. Great book. I read it. Actually, I had my daughter read it, who's 13 as well. She is very into theater. She found it very interesting.
It's quite a compliment.
Yeah. So it's a very dynamic book, Terry. So talk to us. I don't want to be the one to talk about your book on here. Tell us about this latest book.
Well, when I wrote my first book, and trust me, I mean, we'll go back to my ADHD. For me to write a book, that's a big deal. I can't even read a book.
Really? Are you audio?
I should, as much as I drive, but I usually talk on the phone and sell.
Yeah.
But that being said, My wife, when I wrote the first book, like that with ADHD, which I have for sure, um, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And so she said, well, Terry, you need to write 4 books, one for each audience. I'm like, just let me try to write it. So when I decided, okay, this could be a thing,
Yeah.
I do enjoy writing. I will say that. I've always enjoyed writing.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy English, enjoyed writing. And so the second book, I literally directed to students and parents.
Yeah.
The biggest disconnect in our country, Jim, right now, as it applies to manufacturing and our new workforce that we need and we're not getting, is the communication between the student and parent.
Yeah.
And neither one has any perception that's accurate about manufacturing being an option or even on the table.
Yeah.
So the book, as you know, is 2 books in one. They're inverted to each other.
Yep.
And so that has 2 front covers.
Yep.
And the front covers are almost mirror to each other. That was the whole creative process.
Black and white, if I remember correct, right? A little yin and yang action going on. I like it.
And I'm actually extremely proud of the cover design.
Yeah.
I thought it has some of your logo, remnants of it in the front cover. And so the front page is for the parent, and I was so blessed to get the CEO, Barbara Humpton from Siemens USA.
Yeah.
She has a testimonial on the front cover.
Yep.
And so what it's designed for is a parent to read it and literally flip it over and hand to the child, or the student to read it, flip it over, and hand it to the parent.
Right.
And in the middle, Jim, which I'm sure you know, are questions for one to ask the other.
Yep.
All about what should I do for my career?
Yep.
What is my aptitude? What am I good at? What is this thing called manufacturing? And do I go to college?
Yeah.
Can I afford college? Can my parents afford college?
Right.
And you know what? The biggest thing that came out in writing the book was General Motors said, we're not gonna require a 4-year degree for every gosh darn position we hire. And one of my dear friends, Lisa, texted me and said, Terry, did you see this article? So I put it in.
Yeah.
And that speaks volumes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the one, there's people like me that have to have, interconnectivity when they read, if they read.
When they read, yeah.
If they read. And so I have QR codes that lead to videos on my website, Champion Now website, so they can see a digital element if they're challenged like I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. For us, just to share a little bit more of our journey with it, it sparked conversations that we hadn't had with her yet, right?
Perfect.
Which is, I think, what you were trying to do, but it made us think as parents differently about the conversations we're having about her future, right? And because I think so often, and a recent guest and I talked about this, how so often kids are asked at such a young age, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that then follows them and defines them for 15, 13 years after they answer that question, after they draw on a piece of white paper in crayon what they want to be when they grow up. And that then defines the rest of their journey, right?
With no resources for it at all.
0 resources, right? So I think that as parents, not necessarily only in manufacturing, because I love this industry, right? But I know that my daughter may not be interested in this. I know my son probably will be interested in the robotics and automation side, right? So different than the machine shop and precision side that I love so much, but it's still in this industry, right? Sure. But it's just, we need to have those different conversations with our children throughout their entire childhood about how they are perceiving they are changing and their needs and wants are changing for different futures. Am I kind of hitting the nose on that one?
Yeah, and then the one thing I would add is, let's take your daughter with the theater interest, right? I mean, one of the things we do a terrible job at in manufacturing is conveying the industry. Well, there's a need for, I talked to MATC probably 13 years ago or thereabouts about shows for manufacturing.
Yeah.
And Drew Crow, who I interviewed in my second book, sounds like he might have a show coming up or two.
Yep.
So what people don't realize is there's a lot of things in manufacturing. There's accounting in manufacturing. There's sales in manufacturing. There's, there could be theater ties, acting ties,
absolutely,
and sound and podcasts, and
absolutely.
So, point being is that there are connectivity that you can be impacted by manufacturing and not be on the shop floor, and not be necessary. There's sales positions in manufacturing.
Yeah.
So people don't realize that. The one story I have to say, I was speaking at Oakland Community College down in Chicago. And I was supposed to speak to what I hope to be dozens or hundreds of parents, and there was only 5 people.
Oh, wow.
And this was one of the things that led me to write this second book, because I have to reach the parents.
Yeah.
I have to.
Yep.
It is my goal in life going forward that I reach the parents. In Europe, there's a whole different persona about how manufacturing is perceived and the interface between a child and a parent about, okay, what are you going to be when you grow up? It looks entirely different.
Does it really?
It does. And the apprenticeship program, as much as we're trying to build it back up in the U.S., which we're doing a great job, the German American Chamber of Commerce is doing a great job. However, the culture in Europe and Germany and Switzerland is different than our culture. And that doesn't mean it's better or worse, but as it pertains to manufacturing careers, it's better in Europe than ours.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean our culture is worse in other ways or bad in any way.
Yeah.
But this lady, back to this mom that came up to me, one of the 5 parents I did talk to, she came up to me literally in tears. And I'm like, man, I hope it wasn't something I said. She goes, no, it was all about what you said. I'm like, I'm sorry? She goes, no, you give me hope.
Oh.
I thought I failed my son. I thought I failed my children. And what you're telling me is because I can't afford to send them to college, that hope is not lost for them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I go, that's awesome. I said, and it's true.
Yeah.
So if there's any reason why I wrote this book, besides my wife's insistence that I got to write to more of a narrower audience, it was that woman coming up to me and said, oh my gosh, I never knew.
That's awesome, too.
And if I can help parents like that and young people getting into the industry, which anyone can at this show can tell you, I've hired a lot of people into our industry, as much or more than anybody in the industry, in the distribution side, and brought them in. Sometimes I kept them in our company, and sometimes I wasn't able to.
Yeah.
But they found success at other companies for whatever reason. And so, case in point, that's what I want to take as I exit the family business. I want to make an impact in this country, like Harry Moser.
Yeah.
And I want to help, the mom that came up to me, or the young lady at MATC that came up to me and says, I want to be a welder, but my parents don't want me to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I've interviewed a couple of young people that on the show, one of which, before we recorded, told me the story of how her mom and dad have no idea that she's even in advanced manufacturing classes. And she doesn't feel like she can tell them because of their perception of what manufacturing is. And so she is keeping her passion a secret from them. And I said, well, how long is that sustainable? And she said, well, I don't graduate for another 2 years. And I said,
she needs the book.
Yeah, she needs the book. I interviewed her before. I'm going to reach back out. She's local in Phoenix, so I'm going to reach out. I'm going to give her my copy since my daughter and I have already read it. But yeah, and then I hear other stories from young women and men that I've interviewed on this podcast whose lives have been changed because of these programs. They were people who walked through school depressed, anxious, social anxiety, not feeling like they belonged or connected anywhere. And they stumbled into a welding class or a machining class, and all of a sudden felt like they belonged, and they felt at home, and they started to not feel as depressed, not feel as anxious, start to make friends with people there in the class. Like, this industry can do so much, not just for the economy, because it really is a backbone of our economy. It's the reason we have a middle class is this industry. But beyond that, the mental health benefits that the young people can get from this, they're so plugged into phones right now. The serotonin's going off every time they get a like or somebody reposts or whatever. Getting them back to this manual, like, hey, I made this type of mentality, that's where we got to get them back to, right? Sorry to go on a soapbox there. I don't like doing that with my guests because this is about you, not about me. But it's such an important industry, and we just, so many people talk about wanting to make change. What I admire about you is you're making change, right? It's one thing when shop owners say, we can't find enough people, we need to build a stronger apprenticeship program. But then a lot of them don't do anything with that, right? So I really admire the fact that you're out here and you're doing it. You're working with the Andrew Crows. You're working with people to make these things happen. So kudos to you.
No. Well, first of all, thank you. And I don't deserve all the praise that you're giving, but, making a difference. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
And going forward, when I talked to the first high school class that I spoke to, I'm like, all right, that was great, but that's just one high school class.
Yeah.
And so it's all about having the resources and the information. So what I try to do with Champion Now, what I try to do with each book, is elevate other people's stories.
I love it.
My first book, I had 2 podcasters. Now I've been so lucky, 2 podcasters in the book. Now I'm so lucky that I probably know 40 podcasters, and all of them are doing their niche that they fit in their audience.
Yeah.
And so the family's growing.
Yep.
And that's what needs to happen.
Yep.
And so the one thing I have to point out also is, I said first book, the Me Too movement was going on.
Yeah.
Well, the second book, the racial awakening was going on. So I say in my second book, and I talk a lot about it, and I try to feature people like Drew and others, in that there's too few people of color in our industry.
Absolutely.
And, there's that segment, if no other reason, is as media as any other part of the segment of the population for more opportunity and more mentoring.
Yeah.
And if they just knew. Yeah. I mean, Drew's story, how he got into manufacturing, is awesome.
Oh, it breaks my heart every time I hear it. I mean, it's an amazing story.
It is. It is. So, if I can elevate other people's stories in the media, in education, in manufacturing, in mentoring, people can identify, wait a minute, that could be me.
Yeah.
Or I can be the one elevating someone else's voice, or collectively, we're so much more powerful and impactful if we work together instead of just living in our own little cul-de-sac or on our dead-end street.
Yeah.
Let's get on Champion Now was always designed to be an on-ramp to an expressway.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to accomplish.
I love it. So, talk to us about Camp Champ, because that aims to go even younger, right? You're aiming to my daughter's age and my son's age, right? That middle school time in children's lives, I think, is what it's aimed for, right? Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, my uncle, I'm told by my son, one of my sons, that my uncle gave a pen to my son that had been manufactured and maybe had his name on it or had, the company name on it. And he remembered that since he was 12 years old.
Yeah.
And so we came up with this concept where tabletop CNCs, which I think is a way to get more people into manufacturing.
Yeah.
And we came up with a concept. I tried a camp down in Florida where I took my hard costs just to move equipment was $10,000 or more. I'm like, all right, that's not very sustainable. And I literally had 10 students. So I'm like, all right, there's a better way. So I came up with the tabletop CNC that I bought. I put it on a scissor flip on wheels.
Yeah.
And I came up with the help of my son doing these camps in schools or at manufacturers.
Yep.
And then here's the twist. We make pens, we make cases, and then we laser engrave the name on a plate of the student.
I love it.
And here's the caveat that I think really speaks to sustainability and for the future is we have the high school kids in the manufacturing class mentoring the middle school kids.
That's so cool.
And so fast forward, the middle school kids become the high school kids, become the mentors to the next middle school kid.
Yep.
Or young people. And so they go home and they have a pen in a case,
Yep.
laser engraved name on it, with a Champion Now logo on it, or a sponsor's logo, whatever,
Yep.
with a pen inside that they saw being made on a CNC, and they assembled.
Wow.
Now we have potentially inroads to some manufacturing without a big secret.
Yeah. That's awesome. How do communities get something like that set up? How would I know I've volunteered and I've already heard the answer to this, but how do I get something like that set up in Arizona?
Well, first thing you'd have to do is we have to get a host or a person at the helm, so to speak. And then it's just a matter of I did buy a second set of equipment, and I also bought the manufacturing rights to make the equipment.
Good for you.
So once again, it's not all about dollars and cents and making sure. You got to pay for it, obviously, but you got to think long term. So long term, I could replicate this in different parts of the country.
Yeah,
and that's what my hope is. And then I hope I can get to the point of videotaping the process, setting it up, because it's all programmed. The whole point is it's turnkey, and you don't have to start from scratch. Just unpack it, install it, then hit cycle start, and then let the perceptions change as it goes. So then getting sponsors to try to make sure that costs are covered.
Yeah.
And we do some really nice long sleeve shirts, and Champion Now is on one side, and the lead sponsors on the other, long sleeve shirt, and then we have probably 5 to 10 sponsors on the back.
That's awesome.
And then ideally, in a perfect world, I have one for every one set of materials and Camp Champ for every state in the country.
Absolutely. Well, I want to volunteer. Everybody, you're hearing it first. I want the Arizona Camp Champ. When you get ready to send it out west, let me know. I want at least a part of this. I don't know if I know there are probably other people better to run it than me, but I want to be a part of it, even if it's a logo on the back or on a sleeve. I'd love to be a part of it.
Never say there's someone better. The person that steps forward and says, I'm willing, that's the better.
That's the best person.
That's
Got
the
it.
best person.
I got it. I like it. So, Terry, we're coming up on 45 minutes here. What's the biggest change that you've seen in the industry in your time that you've spent?
Well, the biggest change for the detriment is that so many people didn't go into it. That's one biggest change.
Yeah.
And that started in the first recession that I lived through, when people said we were going to be a service-based economy, which I just can't believe someone said that.
Right.
And then at the same time, here's the really bizarre twist. At the same time that happened, computerization came in.
Yeah.
And it started to be, and automation started coming in. And so now we have a situation where, manufacturing is so much more computerized and so much more automated, and it's, to be honest, so much safer, cleaner, and more attractive.
Absolutely.
So now it's kind of like we're almost going full circle, where we almost have to say and promote that manufacturing is going to be our economy, not service-based.
Yeah.
But you don't lose a generation or a generation and a half and don't feel the pain.
Absolutely.
So, so that being said, I think we have to have more Harry Mosers, more Terry Iversons, more podcasts like yours, more people willing to step up like you, and do something about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes it's your time.
Yeah.
I've always chosen to spend my time because I could make a bigger impact that way.
Sure.
But some people say, hey, I'll just write a check. And I'm like, it's all good.
I need to meet more of those people.
You know what?
Because I'm willing to give my time. I just need the cash.
You know what? And there's a balance there.
Yeah.
The people that can we can't minimize people that are willing to spend the time.
Yeah.
We can't minimize people that are willing to write the check.
Yeah.
But we have to have both.
Yeah.
And so they complement each other.
Absolutely.
I've always felt mentoring young people has always been important to me. Anyone that's worked for me will tell you that. They may not have always liked it, but they'll tell you that. And so the only people that we really need to say call out are the people not doing either.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's too many people not doing either.
Yeah.
So either jump into the game or write a check. Both will help.
Yep.
And neither is better than the other.
Yep. Agreed. So last question, second to last question. If you had a billboard that you could place out there with a message from the industry to the world, what would it say?
Well, I was interviewed by one younger man, not a young man, but a younger man on the south side of Chicago. And when I answered that question to him, south side of Chicago, I said, hope is not lost. Manufacturing is for you. So I'm not going to say the same thing. But in that particular case, we were talking about young men in the south side of Chicago that are living in poverty. And there's no reason for it if they can just find their way to my customer shops.
Yep.
But to your question, I will say, I would ask a question. Why is it a big secret? Why is manufacturing a big secret?
Yeah. Okay.
Become part of the solution.
Yeah.
And so it speaks to literally what we're talking about. Why I write the books, why I get on every podcast I can. And no offense, this is the most important one right now.
Well, we all have our unique audiences, and we all work together, right? So, like I said, I had dinner with Chris last night. We have unique audiences, but we also have unique messages. I talk about the people. A lot of other people talk about the tech. Some people more tech. I'm more people, less tech.
Yep.
I love the people of this industry. That's why I do this. So didn't mean to take away from your rant there. All these are important.
So that's what I would say is my second answer to a billboard question.
Yeah.
Why is manufacturing a secret? Success is waiting for you in manufacturing.
Wow.
And in one of the things that I said, if I ever got to the Boeings of the world, the Caterpillars of the world, the IBMs, the Northrop Grumman's, is look, my organization can do an advertising program, just can't do it for free.
Yeah.
And telling other people's stories about success stories. Young people, Josimer Mendez.
Yeah.
In my second book that you read.
Yeah.
He's a plant manager, 9 years out of high school.
Yeah.
He's at one of the best manufacturing high schools in the Midwest. And he never even took the manufacturing program. And yet, somehow, he still found his way into manufacturing by accident.
Right.
He's a plant manager in 9 years.
I love it. Terry, what didn't I ask you that you want to share with my audience?
Boy, you covered so much, and you've been very engaging in asking what message I want to promote. I think the only thing that I haven't said is, do what you can and join the cause, which I've said in different ways. It doesn't have to be my cause; it can be the cause.
Absolutely.
But I think people sometimes get the wrong idea that I'm trying to sell books, and I'm not. I'm trying to get books in hand.
Sure.
And I'm trying to get the message to people to make a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost tens of thousands of dollars with each book that I've written. It's not about the money.
Yeah.
It's about getting the message and putting the resource in the hands of people that can change their lives.
Absolutely.
And so I think we covered that, but I think we need to end it there.
No, I think that's a very important message. Thank you very much, Terry. I appreciate you being on. This has been an awesome conversation. It's been one that we've built up for a couple months, maybe, at this point. And it just so happened that we were both going to be here, so this was the best time to do it. Really appreciate your time, stepping away from the booth. One thing that I do want to add, we were talking about women and people of color. I look around this show, and I don't see many of either, so we still got a lot of work to do.
You know what? I started this message over 10 years ago, and there needs to be more progress in the next 10 years than there has so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Terry. Have a great day. Folks, as we wrap up another amazing episode with the luminary, I think is the best word for it, Terry Iverson. We talked about family legacies spanning almost a century to initiatives like Champion Now and Camp Champ. Terry definitely showed us what it means to live and breathe manufacturing. If you're as inspired as I am, and I know you are, head over to Manufacturing Culture Podcast to catch this episode and all of our previous episodes. Trust me, it's a treasure trove of wisdom and inspiration of other people that you don't want to miss. I want to give a huge thank you to our fantastic sponsor, Speroni, for their absolutely unwavering support. Without them, our mission to elevate the world of manufacturing and culture within it just wouldn't be possible. So before you rush off to implement all these golden nuggets from Terry today, do us a quick favor. Share this podcast with your friends, your family, anyone who needs to hear Terry's incredible story and all about his initiatives. While you're at it, you could rate and review the show. That would be phenomenal because we get more exposure the more you rate and review the show. Thank you very much for joining us today at WIMTS 2023. I'm Jim Mayer signing off from another exciting episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Until next time, keep forging ahead, keep making things, and have a great day.